So we have several questions received through emails today. So we'll go one by one in the order. So if you have more questions, most likely those will be answered by Michael in the upcoming session. But please feel free to add your questions in the chat, and we'll see if we have time, we will go through them. So the first question that we have is from Tony. The question is, while concentrating or holding the sense of I am, where to focus on? Head region or near the heart region? I am able to hold sense I am, but where to concentrate or focus? Head or heart region for ego I am? Do you want me to read the second paragraph as well,
Yes.
Michael?
I think
Okay, sure. While doing self-enquiry, while holding to the I am, somewhere I feel that sense. So where
somewhere
to
I
feel
have
that
to,
sense?
yes.
Yeah, so somewhere I have to feel that sense. So where to feel that sense? In the head region or chest region? I know that we should not concentrate, but somewhere we have to feel that I am sense in our body, right? And if there is time,
No,
okay, after answering the
yeah,
question,
that's it.
yeah, yeah, that's the second question.
Okay. um, right. Okay. Um, uh, that is, in order to investigate what we actually are, we first need to clearly understand what it is we are investigating. We are not investigating any object. If we were investigating an object, we could ask where it is located. But we are not investigating any object, we're investigating the subject. Or more precisely, we're investigating the reality of the subject, what the subject actually is. The subject is essentially just awareness. And it is in that awareness that all things, all objects appear, all phenomena appear. Because of, as ego, we experience ourselves as I am this body. So it seems to us that we are located within this body and that the world is out there. Just like in a dream, when we're dreaming, we seem to be a body in that dream. So there seems to be, we seem to be a body, and there seems to be an external world. The world that we perceive in dream, while dreaming, seems to be outside ourselves, and we seem to be inside the body that we take to be ourself. But when we wake up from a dream, we recognize the whole dream, including the dream body and the dream world, all existed within us. It was all appeared only in our own mind. It had no existence independent of our perception of it. It didn't exist out, the world we perceived in the dream didn't actually exist out there. It was all in our own mind. Likewise, this entire world is within our mind. And the root of the mind, the mind is the, well, in this sense, the term mind has, it's used in a number of different senses. But here, when we talk about, for example, when we say the dream is in the mind, we mean it's in that field of awareness called mind. And that awareness, the awareness element of the mind is ego. So essentially, everything that appears only in ego. Though ego seems to be limited within a body, actually, everything that appears only within ego, we can say within the view of ego, but that the view of ego has no existence independent of ego. So everything exists only in ego. This is why Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Ulajunapadu, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ego itself is everything. why he says that is all, in that context, everything means all phenomena, all objects, everything that appears and disappears. Everything that appears and disappears seems to exist only in the view of ego. So in sleep, when we don't rise as ego, there's no body or world or anything else appears. When we rise as ego in waking or dream, we, simultaneous with our rising as ego, we project and identify a body as I. And through the five senses of that body, we project a world. So we seem to be within that body, but actually the body and the world all exist only within ourselves. So if we are looking for I am, if we're looking for our being, I am is our being. If we're looking for our being within, in a location within this body, which is within this world, we have failed to understand what it is that we are investigating. We are not investigating something that is located anywhere. We're investigating that in which all things are located. That is, everything appears only in the view of ego. So nothing exists independent of ego. As Bhagavan says in that verse, when ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. Because all these phenomena, this entire world, exists only in the view of ego. So without ego, there's no world. That's why in sleep, there's no body or world. Only when we rise as ego in waking and dream do a body and world appear. So all these things appear only in ego. They have no existence independent of ego. So when ego doesn't exist, they don't exist. Therefore, they are all essentially just ego. That is, the substance of all phenomena is only that form of awareness that is called ego. Ego is essentially just awareness, but it's not pure awareness because it's awareness identified with a body. And only when we identify that as soon as we rise as ego, we experience ourselves as a body, and we consequently experience the appearance of other things. So we are trying to turn our attention back to the essential awareness, that is, to that which is aware of all this. So if we think that we have to look in a particular place in the head region or heart region or anything, we are still looking outward. We're still looking at phenomena. But the head, the so-called heart, in the sense of the physical location in the body, these are all phenomena, all objects, all things other than ourselves. So if we're attending to them, to the extent to which we attend to other things, our attention is diverted away from ourselves. The whole point of self-investigation is to turn our attention back towards ourselves. That is, the natural resting place for our attention is on ourselves. Only when we rise as ego do we send our attention outwards, thereby creating the appearance of other things. So in order to subside back into our being and remain as we actually are, we need to attend only to ourself, only to I. So we're not trying to locate I. We already know I. That is the one thing we know more clearly than any other thing is ourself, our own being. We're all aware I am. That is what we need to attend to. So if we think that we have to look somewhere for it, we are still mistaking ourselves to be some type of object. But objects all have a location, but the subject has no location. The subject seems to be located in the body because of its wrong identification of itself as I am this body. But actually, if we try to attend to ourself, we will see that we are actually something distinct from this body. This body is an object, we are the subject. The body is a thing known, we are the knower. So we need to, that is, this practice of self-investigation that Bhagavan has taught us is an extremely simple practice. It's simply a matter of fixing our attention on ourselves. Bhagavan defined what he meant by Atma-vichara in the 16th paragraph of Nana, in which he said, Sada kalamum manate atma vilvetirapatakutan Atma-vichara mendrupaya. The literal meaning of that is, only for always keeping the mind on oneself is the name Atma-vichara. The name Atma-vichara refers only to always keeping one's mind on oneself. So keeping our mind on ourselves means keeping our attention on ourselves. So that is what this practice is all about, keeping our attention on ourselves, not on any object, but only on the subject, or rather the reality of the subject, which is mere awareness. That is what we have to attend to. So if we, as I say, this is a very, very simple practice, but it's subtle, and it requires a certain degree of, a certain subtlety of understanding. So if we are looking for ego or I somewhere within this body, we are looking in the wrong place. We need to attend only to ourselves. And thereby, to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we thereby withdraw our attention from all objects, including this body. I hope that's a clear answer to that question. Does anyone have any questions on this?
One point to add, Michael, in the email he says where how to focus on the ego I am. So as Bhagavan
Oh
says,
yes,
there are
that's
no two
another point.
eyes.
That
Yeah,
was, I forgot about that. Yes,
yeah.
we need to be precise. That is, I am means our being. That is, I am means I exist. So it's our existence or our being. Ego, that is, the pure I am is not ego. Ego is that pure I am mixed and conflated with a body, as I am this body. So ego is the adjunct conflated awareness, I am this body. What we actually are is the pure awareness I am. So the aim in self-investigation is to attend only to the, that is, in that mixed awareness, that conflated awareness, I am this body. The actual awareness element is I am, and the body is an adjunct, something that we mistake to be ourself. So we're trying to attend just to the essential I am in that mixed awareness, I am this body. So we shouldn't take I am to be ego. I am is what we actually are. I am is our being. Ego is that same I am mixed and conflated with adjuncts as I am this body. Is that the point you want? You want to? I meant to say that. I mean, it slipped my mind. So
Yes,
thank you for
yes, Michael.
reminding
Yes,
me.
yes, Michael. And also, when we do the practice, we should not even be thinking the difference between ego, I am, or I am.
No,
The
no, because
practice is to just
there's
focus
only
on
one eye.
I,
There's only
one eye.
one eye.
Yes,
We are trying to now we experience that one eye mixed and conflated with adjuncts as I am this body. So we are trying to, but this body is not what we actually are. So this is the awareness I am this body is a false awareness. It's an illusory awareness. It's not what we actually are. So we are trying to find out what we actually are. So we're trying to fix our attention on that essential I element in the ego. As Bhagavan said in a passage recorded in Maharsha's Gospel, he says, in your investigation into the source of the ahamvriti, you take the essential chit aspect of ego. That is the source. Ahamvriti is it means I thought. It's a synonym for ego. The source of the I thought is I am, the pure awareness I am. So he says, in your investigation into the source of the ahamvriti, you take the essential chit aspect of ego. Therefore, unfailingly, this will lead to the pure awareness that you actually are. So we are not trying to attend to the body or to any place in the body, but only to that fundamental awareness I am. That is, whether this body appears or world appears or whether they disappear. The one thing that we are always aware of is I am. We can't even say aware of, because it's not an object of awareness. That is, this awareness I am is the fundamental awareness. It exists and shines in waking, in dream, and in sleep. It's the one thing that remains unchanged through all the states. All change occurs because of our rising as ego and mistaking ourselves to be this body. This body, which a few years ago was a young boy or girl running around playing, has now grown up and is getting old and will soon be put on a cremation pyre or put in a hole in the ground or whatever. This body is not what we actually have, but all the changes occur for the body. But we are the unchanging awareness. Why is it that this body is completely different to that body that we took to be ourselves when this body was young? That is changed in so many ways. It's grown in size. The hair has become grey, skin has become wrinkled. All these changes have taken place in the body. But what is it that has remained unchanged all this time? It is that basic awareness I am. So that alone is what is real. And that basic awareness remains unchanged, not only in waking, not only in dream, not only in sleep, throughout all three states. But the fundamental awareness I am is the one thing that is constantly shining. That's why Bhagavan often compared it to the screen in a cinema. The screen remains unchanged whether pictures are projected on it or not. So this body and world and mind, all these things, these are just images projected on this screen. We are the screen. So it's that screen, that not literal, that it's an analogy. We are that basic awareness I am, in which all these things appear and disappear. So it's that basic fundamental awareness I am is what we have to attend to.
So we have a series of questions. I will
Yes.
ask one by one.
Yes.
So the first question is, in Sri Bhagavan's Atma-vichara, who am I? The I is the ego I, is it not? Basically, you cannot seek the Brahman. Please explain in the context of Bhagavan's teaching.
There is only one I. If that one I is now we experience that one I conflated with adjunct as I am this body. That adjunct conflated awareness, I am this body, is ego. In other words, as ego, we are always aware of ourselves as I am this body. But what we actually are is only the pure awareness I am. So when we're investigating who am I, we're trying to find out what this I actually is. Now this I is identified with a set of adjuncts called a body. When Bhagavan says, ego is the false awareness, I am this body, he makes clear what he means by body is not just the physical form of the body, but all the five sheaves. That's the physical form of the body, the life that animates the body, which is called prana, the mind, the intellect, and the will that operate within the body. These are called the five sheaves. And these are what make up the person we seem to be. So that is, the I is not any of these five sheaves. But all these five sheaths now seem to be I. So long as we rise as ego, in our view, we wrongly identify ourselves with these five sheaths. So what we're investigating is only I, which is the essence of ego. That is, ego is the I mixed and conflated with adjuncts. Whereas what we're trying to find out is what I actually is. What I actually is the pure I, which is just our being, I am. So when we investigate who am I, we don't have to put a label. This is ego, or this is what we actually are. We are just investigating I. When people ask Bhagavan in this investigation, who am I? Is I ego or the self? Bhagavan would reply ego. The reason he replied that is because the question itself showed, but the questioner hadn't really understood that there's only one I. Uh, so the only I they know is ego. So investigate ego. It's it's a bit like if supposing we are walking on a path through a forest in the dim light of dusk with Bhagavan, and we see something lying on the path ahead of us, and to us it looks like a snake. So we're afraid and say, "Oh, Bhagavan, Bhagavan, there's a snake there." Bhagavan assures us, no, it's not a snake, it's just a rope. But Bhagavan knows, but merely his saying so isn't going to remove our fear. We actually have to see that it's a rope. Then only our fear will go, because to us it looks very much like a snake. So Bhagavan will say to us, look at it carefully. If we ask Bhagavan, which it should I look at? Should I look at the snake it or the rope it? Bhagavan will say, look at the snake. Because if you look at the snake, what do you see? Oh, it's not a snake, it's just a rope. So it's asking whether we're attending to ego I or the real I is just like that. There is only one I. That one I, the one real I, is now mistaken to be ego. That is, it seems to be ego because of its conflation with adjuncts. So first thing we need to understand Atma-vichara. There's only one I. What we're investigating is that one I. Call it ego, call it the self, call it Brahman, call it Swarupa, whatever. It doesn't matter. There's only one I. Who am I? That is what we're investigating. And what that one I essentially is, it's mere being awareness, Satchit. That is, it's our being and it's our awareness. Then the next comment is basically you cannot seek the Brahman. I don't know exactly what is meant by this. That is, Brahman is not something to be sought. Brahman is what we actually are. The I, that which is always shining in us as I, that is Brahman. So Brahman is not some object, something other than ourselves. It's what we essentially are. So when we are attending to ourselves, we are not literally seeking Brahman, but we can say metaphorically we're seeking Brahman. We are seeking to know what we actually are. That doesn't mean we're seeking I, as if, because you could only seek something if you don't know it. But we always know I, we always know Brahman, but we don't know it as it actually is, because we now experience it mixed and conflated with adjuncts. So all we are to attend to is I. And that I, what is that I? Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. There's no Brahman other than I. Brahman is not some object, some big thing out there. Brahman is what we essentially are. So this investigation, who am I, is, in a sense, we can say seeking Brahman. That is, it's seeking to know ourselves as we actually are. And what we actually are is Brahman. We always know ourselves, but now we know ourselves mixed and conflated with adjuncts. We need to know ourselves as we actually are. So the ignorance we need to remove is the false awareness, I am this body. We can remove this false awareness, which is a false awareness of ourself, only by correct awareness of ourself. In other words, only by being aware of ourself as we actually are, which is why we need to attend only to I. That's why in answering the previous question, I said we shouldn't bother about the body, whether I is located here or there, or everything is located only in I. Let's attend just to I. Like, that is, location is just an idea. A place, time, place, all these are just ideas. But to whom are all these ideas? To whom does time seem to exist? To whom does place seem to exist? To whom does location seem to exist? That is it. That is to me. So who is this I, to whom all these things appear? Um, so yeah. So I hope I've answered that first question adequately.
Yes. Thank you, Michael.
That first set, that is, it was, there were, I think, 4 questions or 4 or 5 questions asked by the same person.
Yes. So the second question is, how do I ascertain whether I am doing vichara correctly or not?
Um, the only way to ascertain is to understand clearly what Atma-vichara is. Atma-vichara is nothing but attending to ourself. As Bhagavan said, uh, that is, fixing the mind always on oneself. That alone is Atma-vichara. So fixing the mind on ourself means fixing our attention on ourself. So if we have understood correctly what Atma-vichara is, we will know for ourselves whether we are doing it correctly or not. If we ask the question whether we're doing it correctly or not, that means we still haven't got a clear understanding of what it is we were doing. We are trying to do. That is, we are trying to attend only to ourselves. However, why that is, this is something very, very simple, but it's also very subtle, because ourself is not an object. It's not. If someone asks us to meditate on a name or form of God, we know it's easy. Okay, we've got a name, Ramana. We repeat the name Ramana, Ramana, Ramana. Or we've got the form of Bhagavan. We get a picture of Bhagavan, we have a mental picture of Bhagavan, and we meditate on his form. Meditating on objects is that is, when we ask to meditate on an object, there's no doubt in our mind what we have to do. We just have to fix our attention on that. So we have to fix our attention on the name or the form of God. That's easy. Or some types of meditation involving meditating on a certain place in the body, on certain chakras, or a power that is imagined to exist in the body called Kundalini. These are all objects, so we can visualize these things, we can meditate on them. But I is not an object. So it's something much more subtle than any object. I is that to which all objects appear. That is, objects appear and disappear in the view of I, in the view of ego, to be more precise. But ego is essentially just I. So we are not attending to any object. We're attending to the subject. We're attending to that awareness to which and in which all objects appear and disappear. So it's a very simple practice, but it's also a very subtle practice. So in order to understand, because it's a subtle practice, we need to have a subtle understanding in order to understand what it is. And only if we understand what it is will we be able to do it. And that is it. We can't do something that we don't understand. We need to first understand it. So this is why it is so important to study Bhagavan's teachings very carefully. Studying his teachings carefully and attentively is what is called sravana. Sravana literally means hearing. But that means imbibing the teachings, taking the teachings into our mind. And to do that, we have to do it very attentively. We need to, that is because Bhagavan is talking about a very simple subject, but a very deep and subtle subject. We need to pay close attention to what he's saying. And also, we need to make sense of what he's saying. In order to make sense of it, we need to think about it very carefully. Thinking about the teachings carefully in order to make sense of them is what is called manana. Only if we have done sufficient sravana and manana will we have an adequate understanding in order to begin practicing. So we first have to understand, Bhagavan says we have to attend to ourselves. What is this self we have to attend to? It's not this body, it's not the mind, it's not any object, it's the subject. We have to think carefully about what is this? When I say that is, I say I am sitting. There I is referring to the body. I say I am breathing. There I is referring to the prana, the life. I say I am seeing, I am hearing, I'm thinking, I'm touching, I'm tasting, I'm remembering. All these are functions of the mind. So we're there identifying ourselves as the mind. We're taking the mind to be I. And then when we say, I'm trying to understand this, I'm reasoning, I'm discriminating, discerning. That is the function of intellect. So we're identified with the intellect. And when we say, I want this, I don't want that, I like this, I dislike that, that is the will we're identified with. But actually, we, in the absence of all these things, we still exist in sleep. There's no body, there's no prana, there's no breathing or anything, there's no mind, there's no intellect, there's no will. There's just pure being awareness. That's what shines in sleep. That is what we need to investigate. So we need to think very carefully about Bhagavan's teachings to understand what it is we have to attend to. And only if we've understood what we have to attend to, which it's not something mysterious. It's the one thing that we all know I very clearly. The only problem is that we keep on identifying I with all these objects. But I is not an object, I is the subject. So we need to think about these, understand what it is we have to attend to. If we understand correctly what is Atma-vichara, what it is we have to attend to, then we will have no doubt whether we're doing it correctly or not. If we have a doubt whether we're doing it correctly or not, that means we don't really have a clear understanding. If we have a clear understanding, there'll be no doubt in our mind whether we're doing it correctly or not. So we need to think about these things very carefully to understand them. That is, before we can, three things are talked about: Sravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. These are said to be the means to attain self-knowledge. Sravana, as I say, means paying close attention to the teachings. Manana means thinking carefully about them in order to understand them, to applying them to our experience, to checking whether we've really understood what is being said. And then Nididhyasana literally means deep contemplation. That is the actual practice of self-investigation. But we can do that manana only if we've got a firm foundation of sravana and manana. Because without a firm foundation of sravana and manana, if we've not really paid close attention to the teachings, if we've not really thought about them carefully enough to understand them clearly, we'll always be in the doubt. Am I doing it correctly? Am I not doing it correctly? That means we haven't really understood it. So we need to think carefully and understand. When Bhagavan says Atma-vichara is just fixing our mind on ourselves, what does it mean to fix our mind on ourselves? Fixing our mind on something we understand. Fixing our mind means attending to it. So we can fix our mind, as I say, we can fix it on a name or on a form. We can fix it on the name Ramana and be mentally repeating the word Ramana and trying to keep our attention on that. Or we can fix it on a form. We can meditate, we can have a picture of Bhagavan and meditate on his form. But when he says to meditate on I, what does that mean? That's what we have to understand. I is not an object. It's not a name. It's not a form. That the word I is obviously a name, but we're not investigating the word I. What the word I refers to. All other words refer to objects, phenomena. But I refers to that to which all the objects appear, and that in the view of which objects appear and disappear. So we are the one thing that never appears or disappears, that is ever shining. So if we understand that, if we have a clear understanding of what is meant by I or ourself, then we will have no doubt whether we're doing the vichara correctly or not.
Okay. The next question we have is when we are doing vichara, the mind is split into two parts as observing mind and observed mind, and observing mind disguising as the self-conscious. But in actual fact, both are the same inert mind. It is also paradoxical that we have to put effort to subside the mind, but any effort by the mind will strengthen itself. But the whole purpose of Atma-vichara is to weaken the mind and descend into the heart.
Okay, again, this is again a matter of not having a clear understanding of the teachings. The mind in vichara, the mind isn't split into two parts. That is, the mind in this context means the attention, or that which is attending, that which is observing. The observer has to observe itself. So it's not that there are two things, one thing observing and another thing observed. It is what we are to observe is only ourself. What we are to attend to is only ourself. So that which is attending is that which it is attending to. They're not two things. That is, this is a Advaita abhyasa, a practice of non-duality. If you've got two things, one thing attending to another thing, then that's not non-duality. Logically, the only correct practice of Advaita has to be self-attention. Because if you're attending to anything other than ourselves, we've got two things, so we've got duality. If we want a non-dual practice, it has to be self-attentiveness. It has to be that which is attending or observing has to be that which is attended to, has to be attending to or observing itself, not attending to observing something else. So if we think that when we are doing Atma-vichara, this mind is split in two parts as observing mind and observed mind, that shows we haven't understood what the practice is. It's not one thing, it's not one eye observing another eye. There's only one eye. That one eye has to observe itself. And then he says, and observing mind disguised as the self-conscious. No, it's not, we're not, that is, we are always self-conscious, self-aware, self-conscious in the sense of self-aware. Self-awareness is our very nature. That is, we are nothing but awareness, and the nature of awareness is always to be aware of itself. We can't be aware without being aware, but we're aware. And being aware, but we're aware, entails being aware, but we are. So that is, self-awareness is the very nature of awareness. So it's not a matter of disguising. Self-awareness is what we actually are. And then he goes on to say, but in actual fact, both, referring to the observing mind and the observed mind, are the same inert mind. If the mind is inert, how can it be observing? It doesn't make sense. That is, we need to understand that the word I is used in many different senses. So we need to understand from the context the sense in which the word I is being used. There's a verse in Upadeshundya in which Bhagavan clarifies this. That is verse 18. But very few people pay close attention to this verse and understand really what Bhagavan is talking about. What Bhagavan says in this verse is, he begins by saying, Ennangale manam. That means thoughts alone of a mind. And then he goes on to say, Yavinam, of all, meaning of all thoughts, nanam enam ename mulamam. The thought called I is the root. And then he ends by saying, uh, um, I can't remember, manamenal nan, or nan manamenal, or something. That is, what is called the mind is only I. So we need to understand this. Bhagavan has packed a lot into this verse. And it's a verse we need to think about carefully in order to understand what he means. When he says thoughts alone of a mind, that is, he's there giving a broad definition of the term mind. That is, we often use the term mind as a collective term to refer to the totality of all thoughts. And when Bhagavan talks about thoughts, he's not just talking about the mental chatter that's going on. Thought in this context means mental phenomena. All mental phenomena are thoughts. So in mental phenomena of any kind, what we would normally call perceptions, memories, feelings, emotions, all these are thoughts. So everything is a thought, and the totality of all thoughts is what is called the mind. So in its broadest sense, the term mind refers to the totality of all thoughts. That's what Bhagavan is essentially saying in the first sentence. But then he goes on to say, but of all these thoughts, the thought called I alone is the root. What does this mean? The thought called I is ego. That is, why he refers to ego as a thought called I is because ego is essentially just, well, ego is a thought, but it's a thought unlike all other thoughts, because all other thoughts are jada. That means they're devoid of awareness. So many thoughts are constantly appearing and disappearing in our view, but none of those thoughts know each other. Sorry, none of those thoughts know themselves or know anything else. They're all just objects. They're phenomena, things that appear and disappear. But they all appear and disappear in the view of ego, the thought called I. So unlike all other thoughts, the thought ego is a thought that is endowed with awareness. And all other thoughts seem to exist only in the view of ego. So we can say the mind consists of two parts. It consists of subject and object. The subject is ego. That is, the knowing element of the mind is ego. All the other thoughts are objects. So since the objects have no existence independent of the subject is the root of all the objects. That's why Bhagavan says, so all thoughts, the thought called I is the root. It's the root because without this thought I, without ego, no other thought can exist. Because all other thoughts exist only in the view of ego. So Bhagavan is what Bhagavan essentially is saying there, mind is the root of all thoughts, because it's that other thoughts come and go. But the one thought that is constant throughout the waking state and throughout the dream state is this thought called I, ego. It's because it's only in the view of ego that all these, that waking and dream all happen only in the view of ego. So ego is the root. Therefore, what the mind essentially is just I, it's just this ego. So when we talk about mind, well, Bhagavan often uses the term mind. We need to understand from the context whether he's referring to the other thoughts or whether he's referring to the first thought. When, for example, Bhagavan says, um, uh, the mind projects all thoughts, there the mind is referring to this first thought, I. When he says, fix the mind on oneself, that means fix the attention of ego on oneself. So it's the when he talks about the mind as the knower, what he means by mind is ego. When he talks about mind as something that is known, then it's all the other thoughts. So we need to understand from a context that is all the other thoughts are jada. That is what this questioner has put as inert. Inert is not quite the correct translation because inertia means not moving, but often inert is used in the sense of insentient. Yes, all the other thoughts are insentient. That is, all the perceptions, memories, thoughts, feelings, and so on. These are all things of which we are aware. They are not aware of themselves. So thoughts don't think themselves. They're not aware of themselves. The thinker of all thoughts is the first thought called ego, which is the only thought that is endowed with awareness. And so that's the first half of this question. The other half, he says, it's also paradoxical that we have to put effort to subside the mind, but any effort by the mind will strengthen itself. But the whole purpose of Atma-vichara is to weaken the mind and descend into the heart. It is not correct to say any effort by the mind will strengthen itself. Rather than talking about effort, we need to talk about attention. That is, attention to anything other than ourself will strengthen the mind. Attention to ourself brings about the subsidence of the mind. So if we're making effort to attend to other things, that is feeding the mind. Whereas if we're making effort to attend only to ourselves, that brings about the subsidence of the mind. So if we are using our mind to know anything other than ourselves, that effort will strengthen the mind. Whereas if we're using our mind to attend only to ourselves, that effort will bring about the subsidence of the mind. This is something that Bhagavan has made clear in a way that hasn't been made clear, as far as I'm aware, in any of the ancient sastras, any of the ancient sages, in the written records. That is, sages may have explained this to their disciples, but it's not written anywhere. Once it's pointed out by Bhagavan, we can see it as implied in so many places. But Bhagavan alone has made it clear. The nature of ego is to rise, stand, and flourish by attending to things other than itself, but to subside by attending to itself. This is essentially what Bhagavan is saying in verse 25 of Ulladu. In verse 25 of Ulladu, he describes ego as a formless demon. It's formless because it's got no form of its own. In its essential formless nature, ego is just pure awareness. It is called ego only when it attaches itself to a form, identifies itself as a form. That doesn't mean the forms exist independent of ego. As soon as we rise as ego, we project a body and identify that body as I. Just like when we're dreaming, as soon as we begin dreaming, we never know the actual point at which we begin dreaming, but as soon as we begin dreaming, we find we're a body and there's a world. Likewise, that is, as soon as the ego rises, it projects a body, and through the five senses that body projects a world. What happens in dream is exactly the same as what happens in waking. I mean, in both states, it's just both are a projection of ego. So ego first projects a body, which it identifies as I, And having identified this body as I, through the sense of this body, it projects a world. So what Bhagavan says in that verse is, grasping form, it comes into existence. The form he's referring to there is the form of the body, that is the form of five sheaths. So without that is, as soon as ego comes into existence, it projects and identifies the body as I. So this all is simultaneous. That is the nature of ego. Its rising brings into existence a body which it experiences as I. So he says, grasping form, it comes into being. Grasping form, it stands. Stands here means it endures. We cannot remain as ego for a moment without constantly identifying ourselves as a body. So throughout the waking and dream states, we're aware of ourselves as I am this body. And as I said earlier, this body doesn't just mean the physical form of the body. It includes all the five sheaths. So throughout the waking and dream states, we're aware of ourselves as I in this body. That's why Bhagavan said, grasping form, it comes into being, grasping form, it stands. And then he goes on to say, Urupatri undu mikaongam, grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. That is, having grasped the form of a body as I, we don't stop there. We then project all these other forms. We project this whole world and all the phenomena that constitute the world, and we are constantly attending to these things. So attending to all these forms, or that means all phenomena, objects, is the food on which ego lives. So the more we attend to things other than ourselves, the more we are feeding and nourishing ego. And then he says, uruvittu urupatram, leaving form, it grasps form. So the very nature of ego cannot remain for a moment without constantly grasping form. When it ceases to grasp form, it subsides in sleep or in some other state of manolaya. So the ego it's always aware of itself as I am this body, and because it's aware of itself as I am this body, it's consequently aware of other things. And by attending to all those other things, it's feeding itself. But then he says, Tedinal autum pidicum, if sought, it takes flight. That is, if ego seeks to know its own reality by investigating who am I, it takes flight. That means it runs away, it disappears. That's a metaphorical way of saying it subsides and dissolves back into its source. So, but what we have to understand from that verse is, so long as we attend to anything other than ourselves, which is an effort, that's why when we, after attending to other things for 16 hours or so, we get tired, and we're too tired to continue attending to other things, so we cease to grasp form and we subside in sleep. And by remaining for some time in sleep, we get re-energized and we again rise and go through the same thing again and again and again, endlessly. So long as we're attending to anything other than ourselves, we are thereby nourishing ego. But when we attend to ego, the nature of ego is to subside, because ego has no form of its own. So without holding on to form, ego cannot stand. So if ego tries to hold on to itself, to the extent to which ego focuses its attention on itself, it thereby lets go of all forms. And therefore, since it's not holding on to any form, it subsides back into its source. So the effort that will bring about the subsidence of the mind is self-attentiveness. Attending to anything other than ourselves is the effort that will feed and nourish and strengthen the mind. So again, this isn't paradoxical at all. It's just understanding the nature of ego. That is, we can explain the same thing in another way. We seem to be ego so long as we're looking at things other than ourselves. If we look at ourselves, there's no such thing as ego to be found. So long as we're attending to other things, we are nourishing the illusion that we are ego. But when we look at ourselves to see where is the who am I, this ego, there's no such thing as ego to be found, because by the simple uh, uh, the simple effort to attend to ourself brings about the subsidence of ego, and ego, when it subsides, where does it subside? It subsides back into the source from which it rose, and thereby it dissolves there. So all these questions are asked because of not having carefully attended to what Bhagavan has taught us, and not having thought about it carefully to understand what it means. So these things seem paradoxical if we don't understand the teachings. If we do understand the teaching, there's no paradox at all. This is simply the nature of ego. Is what I said there, is it clear to everyone? Does anyone have any questions on this?
Okay, we'll go to the next question, Michael.
Mm.
In our day-to-day life, we experience that when we do some work repeatedly in the initial stage, even though we feel that we are putting lots of effort, but eventually the same job becomes effortless after some time. I feel that vichara also has to be performed in the same manner. In the initial stage, we may have to try hard to keep the mind incessantly in the heart, but eventually it will become an effortless task. I'm sure many would have raised similar concerns to Bhagavan. Please shed some light on this.
Um, Attending to ourself is fundamentally different to attending to anything else. Yes, if we practice any work, supposing we want to become a musician, we want to play a musical instrument, we have to practice and practice and practice. And what initially it seems very difficult, after some time it becomes effortless. That is a person who's a master at playing some musical instrument, piano or veena or whatever it is. Because they've put so much practice in, it becomes almost effortless. But vichara is something quite different, because the very nature of ego is to grasp form. Whereas in Atma-vichara, we are trying to grasp ourself, the formless awareness. So the Atma-vichara is going against the very nature of ego. The very nature of ego is to attend to other things. We are trying to attend to ourselves. So until ego is annihilated completely, there will always be a resistance. That is, ego will always be trying to grasp other things in an effort to survive. So this Atma-vichara will never become effortless. We have to continue applying effort to hold on to self-attentiveness. Because if we don't make effort to attend to ourselves, our attention will naturally go out towards other things. Because that's the very nature of the mind or ego, to attend to things other than itself. So effort is required till the very end. As we go deeper in this practice, in a certain sense, it becomes easier because we have greater love for it. But as we have greater love for it, we go deeper. And the deeper we go, the more resistance we have. Because as ego, we are not, until ego is ready to surrender itself completely, until it's ready to put its head on the chopping block, this will be effort will be required to hold on to self-attentiveness. Only when ego is annihilated, then we come to our natural state of effortless, pure awareness. So effort is required so long as ego survives. We are not, we shouldn't expect that it'll become effortless. It'll be a struggle right up to the end. And as I say, the deeper we go, the more resistance there will be. Resistance isn't coming from outside, it's coming from us. It's our unwillingness to surrender ourselves. It's because of our unwillingness to surrender ourselves completely that we resist. So this, as Bhagavan often said, this spiritual path, it's a battle within our own will between the Vishaya Vasanas on the one hand and the Satvasana on the other hand. Vishaya Vasana are the inclination to attend to things other than ourselves. In other words, the inclination to grasp form. Whereas Satvasana is the inclination to attend to ourselves. And the more we practice self-attentiveness, the stronger the Satvasana will become, and correspondingly the weaker the Vishaya Vasanas will become. But as the Sattvasana becomes stronger, the Vishaya Vasanas fight back ever more fiercely. An analogy I sometimes give for this is if some hunters who have only knives and spears are hunting a tiger, a group of them they may have hit the tiger so many times, pierce it with their swords or their spears or whatever. So the tiger's very is wounded, and finally it's got in a. They surround it. It's very weak because of its wounds, but because its life is in danger. That tiger, though it's very weak, it will fight back more fiercely than ever. Likewise, ego, as it becomes weaker, it will fight back more strongly. I mean, it may seem paradoxical, but it's not paradoxical because it's fighting for its very life. So we're not doing this because it's something easy. This is the supreme. This is the supreme undertaking. There's no human undertaking greater than this undertaking of self-investigation and self-surrender. So we shouldn't. We have to take this very, very seriously. That is because our attachment to this false identity, we will be constantly resisting this. So it's a battle going on within our own will or our own heart, as Bhagavan said.
Thank you, Michael. The next question is, inquire the ego I to look for its source. Anyway, there is no way the mind can reach the source. By persistent practice, eventually the ego subsides. When this happens effortlessly and you don't have to consciously do self-enquiry, then you become self-conscious. But that is not jnana. Self-consciousness itself has to be dissolved, and that could lead to the final stage.
No, again, this is not a very clear. This shows not a clear understanding of the practice. When we turn our attention back towards ourself, now that we're attending to, now it seems to be ego. But to the extent to which we attend to I, it subsides back into its source. That's our being. And he said there's no way the mind can reach the source. The mind has to reach its source. That's our whole aim. The mind is reaching the source every day when we fall asleep, but it's doing so because of tiredness. We have to reach the source by holding on to self-attentiveness. That is the only way to bring about the subsidence of mind in such a way that it will not rise again. That is, if the mind subsides by any means other than self-attentiveness, it will certainly rise again. When we fall asleep, the mind subsides because of tiredness. If we are in a coma, the mind has subsided because of maybe some head injury. If we're under general anesthesia, the mind has subsided because of the anesthetic drugs that have been given. If we are in Kevala Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the mind has subsided because of some practices of pranayama and other such yogic practices. These are all these states are states of manolaya. That's temporary subsidence of mind because they're brought about by some means other than self-attentiveness. Only self-attentiveness will bring about the subsidence of a mind in such a way that it will never rise again. Why is this difference there? The reason is when the mind subsides by any means other than self-attentiveness, when the mind will subside back into the source, and what then remains shining is the pure awareness I am. In the case of self-attentiveness, okay, so what shines in sleep or nirvikalpa samadhi or coma or general anesthesia or swoon or any such state, what remains shining is only the pure awareness I am. But that doesn't annihilate ego because ego has already subsided. You cannot annihilate ego when it's absent. So it is ego, it is as ego that we need to experience that pure awareness. But as soon as ego experiences itself as pure awareness, it ceases to be ego and remains as pure awareness. But it is necessary for us as ego to experience that pure awareness in order to annihilate ego. So as soon as we as ego experience ourselves as pure awareness, we cease to be ego and remain as pure awareness. So this can be brought about only by self-attentiveness. So when we attend to ourselves, we thereby subside and merge back into our source. That merge back into our source means we experience ourselves as the pure awareness that we actually are, and thereby we remain as such eternally. So the mind has to reach its source, but it has to reach the source by means of self-attentiveness. Then only it will reach the source in such it will subside into the source in such a way that it never rises again. And then he goes on, by persistent practice, eventually the ego subsides. Yes, yes. I mean, ego is subsiding to the extent to which we're self-attentive. So ego will subside completely only when the self-attentiveness becomes perfect self-attentiveness. So as per the Sadhu Om used to explain this by saying, turning our attention back to ourselves is like trying to turn 180 degrees. Normally our attention is facing outwards towards the world. We're trying to turn it 180 degrees back towards ourselves. This is, it's not literally 180 degrees, but this is just to help us to understand what is required. So turning our attention 180 degrees towards ourselves means ceasing to be aware of anything else and being aware only of ourselves. But when we are practicing self-investigation, we are not managing to turn a full 180 degrees. We may be turning 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 90 degrees, even 120 degrees, 170 degrees, but there's still some lingering awareness of other things. Only when we attend to ourselves so keenly that we cease to be aware of anything else have we turned the full 180 degrees. As soon as we turn the full 180 degrees, ego is dissolved in such a way that it never rises again. And then he said, when this happens effortlessly and you don't have to do you don't have to consciously do self-inquiry, then you become self-conscious, but that is not jnana. What else is jnana but pure self-conscious? You become self-conscious. We need to understand what this means. We are always self-conscious. We're always self-aware. But now that our self-awareness is mixed with adjuncts, so instead of being aware of ourselves as just I am, we're aware of ourselves as I am this person, I am this body. So we need to be so clearly self-aware, but we cease to be aware of anything else. That is jnana. And that is final. And he says self-consciousness itself has to be dissolved. How can self-consciousness be dissolved? Self-consciousness or self-awareness is our very nature. But now what is dissolved is all the adjuncts that are mixed along with, which are conflated with that self-awareness. When the adjuncts are dissolved, ego, that is, the dissolution of adjuncts and the dissolution of ego are one and the same, because ego is the adjunct conflated self-awareness. So when ego is dissolved, pure self-awareness alone remains. That is the final stage. So all these questions are asked because of not having paid close enough attention to what Bhagavan has actually taught, and therefore not and not having thought about it carefully enough to understand it clearly.
Thank you, Michael. Is there any other follow-up question on this? Okay, so we have one more question which is also related to the practice. Question from Tim. I have a question regarding Michael's thoughts on further refining my practice of self-investigation. At which point in the practice of self-investigation does it make more sense for ego to look at itself directly? Thedinal otam pidikum. Or investigate to whom the thoughts arise. It seems both results are the same, but nuances are different. For example, in the rabbit anecdote on page 57 of Michael's translation of Atma-vichara, it would make more sense to look directly at the ego or rabbit if it is firmly outside of its hole. However, if the ego or rabbit is more in its hole and one is holding on to oneself more firmly, it seems like investigation of oneself per Bhagavan's instruction as discussed in Michael's translation of Nanar would be more appropriate. In the bracket, vigilantly, as soon as each thought appears, if one investigates to whom it has occurred, it will be clear to me. If one investigates who am I by vigilantly attending to oneself, the me to whom everything else appears, the mind will return to its birthplace, namely oneself, the source from which it arose. In other words, it seems to me the further the metaphorical rabbit is out of its hole, the more skillful it would be to look directly at it than to investigate to whom the thoughts arise. What would Michael have to say about this?
Okay. What Bhagavan talks about in the 6th paragraph of Nana, he talks about investigating to whom and about investigating who am I. What he means by investigating to whom is turning our attention back towards ourselves. That is, if any other thought appears, thought means anything, because the whole world is a thought. So if any thought appears, a thought of any kind whatsoever, that means our attention has been diverted away from ourselves towards that thought, because thoughts can't appear unless we attend to them. So therefore, Bhagavan says, as soon as each thought appears, vigilantly, if one investigates to whom it has occurred, it will be clear to me. So investigating to whom it has occurred means turning our attention back towards ourselves, the one to whom the thought has occurred. And then he says, if one investigates who am I, the mind will return to its birthplace. When he says if one investigates who am I, what he means is, having turned our attention back to ourself, if we hold on to that self-attentiveness, the mind will return to its birthplace. So the difference between investigating to whom and investigating who am I is investigating to whom is turning our attention back towards ourselves, away from whatever has appeared, whereas investigating who am I means holding on to that. So it's the same thing. when we turn our attention back to ourselves, we need to hold on to that self-attentiveness. That is what he means by investigating who am I. So investigating to whom is necessary only when our attention is diverted away from ourselves. Investigating to whom means turning our attention back to ourselves, the one to whom all the thoughts of all other whatever other thing has appeared, the one to whom it has appeared. Having turned our attention back to ourselves, we need to hold on to that self-attentiveness. If thoughts appear, if we try to apply this to the analogy of a rabbit, that is, the thoughts appear because the rabbit is outside its hole, it's playing around outside. So in other words, ego has risen. As soon as ego rises, it projects thoughts and attends to them. So in order to, if we turn our attention away from whatever has appeared back towards ourselves, we as ego thereby subside. That is the rabbit going back to its hole. And once the rabbit has gone back to its hole, it needs to remain there. That is investigating who am I. I mean, if we want to apply it to that, but it's not really necessary here to bring in that rabbit analogy. The reason I use that rabbit analogy is to illustrate the fact that the nature of ego is to rise, stand, and flourish so long as it's attending to other things. But if it attends to itself, its nature is to subside back into its source. Just like a young rabbit will come out of its hole and play around so long as it thinks no one is looking at it. But as soon as it's aware that it's being looked at, it retreats back to its burrow, to its hole. And the more keenly it's looked at, the more it retreats into its burrow. Likewise, ego, the more we attend to it, the more it subsides, and it withdraws back into its source. So we need to understand when Bhagavan talks about investigating to whom, it doesn't mean asking to whom, it means investigating. That is, investigating to whom means turning our attention away from whatever may have appeared back towards ourselves, the one to whom it has appeared. And having turned our attention back, we try to hold on to that self-attentiveness. Holding on to that self-attentiveness is what he refers to when he says, if one investigates who am I, the mind will return to its birthplace.
Thank you, Michael.
I have a quick question.
Yes,
Is it
certainly.
possible?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, you basically touched on it, Michael, but it's just put another way, I guess, that is I'm about to do. I tend to be very drawn into political situations. I successfully spent a year removed from the news, kind of had a news blackout, and because everything was just so awful, I frankly felt it was best I removed myself. It was healthier. Yeah. And I thought that was very good. I felt good all year long. And now I can feel the creep of this, what we call it, an addiction. I feel the creep of my interests in this area because of what I perceive as just injustice in general, creeping up again. Yes. And I struggle with that. And I know it's not healthy for me. Though I do remember, I know this is silly, but I do recall many videos and stories about Bhagavan keeping abreast on the current events. He wasn't going to put himself in the middle of anything, but he certainly read the news. And I thought, well, maybe it's okay if I read the news occasionally. But I don't know. I need your help.
Bhagavan is not touched by all these things.
Right.
Bhagavan, there's a film of Bhagavan reading a newspaper. The reason Bhagavan read the newspaper is people gave the newspaper to Bhagavan, he would look at it. But Bhagavan is not really concerned about all these things.
Yeah.
One incident I read about somewhere, I don't know whether it was published or it was just among some manuscripts that were in the ashram archives. Many years ago, I remember reading. It seems that sometime it would have been probably around 1938, 39, there was talk among the devotees in the old hall about the political situation in the world. And someone asked Bhagavan, people are different opinions. Some people say we're at the dawn of a new era. There's going to be peace and prosperity in the world, and other people say no, the world is going down. It's going to descending into another great war, like the Great War that happened in Europe 20 years earlier. What is your opinion about this? And Bhagavan said, there is one great power, one Parameshwara Shakti, that is driving all events. Who cares for your opinion or my opinion? That shows how humble Bhagavan is. He is actually that supreme Parameshwara Shakti that is driving all events. But he because he's asked for his opinion, he said, who cares for your opinion or my opinion? That is the world, whatever is happening in the world. So many things we see happening in the world that make no sense at all.
Right.
I mean, for example, just some simple incident. Some just over 10 years ago, no, not even 10 years ago, there was a referendum in the UK about leaving Europe, and
Right.
somehow the yes won. That was a totally, it's such a foolish thing that was done, but somehow people's minds were, that is, people see a lot of injustice in the world, and people in power or people who are able to influence other people's minds, they will pick out scapegoats. So in that case, the scapegoat was the European Union. Actually, the problems that were in the UK were not caused by the European Union. If anything, the European Union was doing only good to not only good, but mostly it was doing good to the UK. The problem was caused by the wealth disparity and so many other things. Likewise, in America, there's a huge. Historically, I don't think there's ever been a time when there's been such huge wealth disparity. There are people in America who that is one person who has $500 million wealth, more, and the top 1% have more wealth than all the bottom 60% or something combined. Such a huge wealth disparity. There's such extreme poverty there, alongside such huge wealth. But the people who have a vested interest in that, they will influence people to point out, oh, it's immigrants, it's this, it's that, it's the
Right.
it's all these terrorists or whatever. That is, terrorists cause problem, but the problem caused by terrorists is minuscule to the problem caused by these super rich, who are accumulating all the wealth for themselves. So people in America voted for a far-right government, but what they voted for is the very cause of all their problems. But they were influenced. So this is the way the world works. That is democracy. We think democracy it's a good system of government. Well, it's probably better than any other system of government, but people are easily influenced by the media. And who controls the media? The super rich people. So
Right.
these are just two examples. This is just the way the world goes. The world has never been a just place. You see the past. In the past, there was slavery. There was so many injustices in any society. Choose any society in the world. Choose the Roman Empire. Choose the Middle Ages in Europe. Choose the the European migration to North America. So many injustices were there. See, there's social injustices in India with the caste system. Things may have a good intention, but they become distorted. Because some people have more influence and they use their influence to benefit themselves. So this world has never been a just place. So it's very natural for a person who has a certain degree of sattva to want want more justice in the world. But when people often came in Bhagavan's time, India was under British rule, which was obviously grossly unjust. That is, the British were basically in India siphoning off the wealth of the country for their own benefit. Yes, they brought railways and they brought technological advances, so we can't say, I mean, everything in this world, if we see it, there's always a mixture of good and bad. But the British may have brought some benefits to India, but they did so for their own benefit. That is why the British brought railways to India, because in order to siphon off more and more wealth of India. So that was a huge injustice. And so there was a struggle for independence going on throughout most of the time Bhagavan was in Tiruvannamalai. That struggle for independence was going on. So people often came to Bhagavan and talked about this and said they wanted to fight for justice and everything. Bhagavan's advice was always, he who has created this world knows how to look after it. Leave it to him. You take care, you look after yourself. That is, we haven't set ourselves right, but we want to set the world right. Ultimately, all the injustices in the world are called, well, firstly, even if we lived in a very just society, the nature of embodied existence is we are born, we are susceptible to illnesses, we're susceptible to accidents, and eventually, even if we live a relatively healthy life for 100 years or so, sooner or later we're going to die. So this is the embodied existence is samsara. The nature of samsara is suffering. But on top of all the natural causes, there are all the human causes. They're in the form of injustice. That injustice will always be there. There'll always be people in any society who have the upper hand and get things for their own benefit. Karl Marx wanted to have had an ideal of making an equal society, but it never happens, because even when in countries where there were Marxist governments, it wasn't all equal. Those who had power took advantage of the situation for their own benefit. So there's no such thing as a perfect system of government. And the world will, if you set right one problem in the world, another problem will be caused. So when people were concerned about the world and wanted to do something about the world, Bhagavan's advice was, he who has created this world knows how to take care of it. Leave it to him. We have to take care of ourselves. When we see the injustices in the world, we see they're caused by what? They're caused by greed is one obvious thing. People who have amassed $500 billion, that's pure greed. Why does any one person need so much money? It's obviously unnecessary, but they're not satisfied. Having got $500 billion, they want another $500 billion. And if they get $1 trillion, they want another $1 trillion. This is the nature of desire. And so greed is one major reason for the injustices in the world. But what is the root cause of greed? It is ego. So the seeds of the evil we see in the world are in each one of us. So if we cannot rectify the world, but at least we can rectify ourselves. So Bhagavan always said, take care of yourself. That is, sort out your own problems first. If we want to see the world perfect, first we have to become perfect. And what Bhagavan taught, if you become perfect, in other words, if you see yourself as you actually are, you will see the whole world is perfect. That is, there's no world other than you. You are there. So all the problems ultimately are caused by ego. So rather than concerning ourselves with trying to set right this injustice or that injustice, let us try to tackle the root cause of all injustice, which lies in us as ego. If ego is annihilated, what remains is the one infinite perfect whole, in which there's which is beyond all dualities such as justice and injustice, good and bad, right and wrong. All these pairs of opposites come into being only when we rise as ego. So Bhagavan is concerned not with the symptoms of the disease, but with the root cause of the disease. If you treat the root cause of a disease, the symptoms will take care of themselves. So the root cause is ego. That is what Bhagavan is concerned about. So if we want to follow Bhagavan, yes, it's very easy. I mean, it's very natural for us to be concerned about all the injustices in the world. But can we rectify it? Can we, those examples I said of the EU referendum and the election last year in America,
Right.
the outcome is, when we see it clearly, it was a foolish outcome. But what can we do about that? Everyone is concerned about their own well-being, and people are misled by powerful people who have power. Then the world will always be like this. It has always been like this, and it will always be like that.
Would Bhagavan, or has Bhagavan gone so far as to say that things that are going on, say in Gaza, for example, are there for a reason? It looks awful, it looks
Yeah.
horrible from an outside perspective, but there's a designed purpose for it. Would you say
Everything has a purpose? Yes.
design?
During Bhagavan's lifetime, millions of people were being gassed in concentration camps in Europe. In Russia, millions of people were being sent to Siberia to die of cold. All these things, ultimately, as is said in the Bible, as you sow, so you shall reap. The logical corollary of that is, as you reap, so you have sown. So whatever we experience is the fruit of our own past karmas. That doesn't justify these things, but this is just the things happen as they're meant to happen. It ultimately, there's a saying in Tamil, "Ellam nammeke," all is only for good. If we believe in the power of divine grace, we have to accept that even all these injustices we see in the world, they're all happening for a good purpose. Because ultimately, Bhagavan doesn't want to cheat us by giving us small pleasures, by removing our small difficulties. He wants to treat the root cause of all problems, which is ego. So, because only when ego is removed will we experience ourselves as the infinite happiness that we actually are. So, if for us, because we're attached to the body, the murder of millions of people in concentration camps or in gulags in Siberia, there's gross injustices. What happens in Gaza, gross injustice. What's happening in Ukraine, gross injustice. But each and every one of us is experiencing the fruits of our past karmas. And we're not just randomly experiencing we're not experiencing them in a random manner. Divine grace is selecting which fruits we should experience when, in such a way that will be most conducive for our spiritual development. So for us, someone being killed is a terrible thing. But for divine grace, as Krishna says in the Gita, the wise do not weep for those who live or those who die. We're all born and we're all going to die. How we die, when we die, that's all that is allotted to us in such a way that may seem very terrible now, but ultimately it's for our own good.
Thank you.
So if we are concerned for our own good, we should be focusing on eradicating ego. And to eradicate ego, we need to withdraw our mind more and more from its concerns about the world. So I know what you mean. It's very easy to read the news and to be upset about all the injustices that are going on in the world. But what can we do about it? We can't do anything. So our time would be spent much better in investigating who am I, the one to whom all these injustices are appearing. If we
Thank you so
see
much.
injustices in our dream, what is the best way of rectifying all those injustices? To wake up from a dream. According to Bhagavan, this is all a dream. So let us try and wake up from this terrible dream we're all experiencing.
Yes, yes. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. The next question we have is from Rupendra. Do you drink coffee? Is black coffee a sattvic food? I heard you say that nowadays milk is not sattvic, but how about black coffee?
Well, I personally don't drink tea or coffee, but I've just never been in the habit of it. I think both tea and coffee are mild. They have a mildly intoxicating effect. Those who are habituated to drinking it don't notice it. But if you never drink tea or coffee and when you drink it, you'll notice it has some effect of that you sort of feel a bit lightheaded or something. It's possibly not the most sattvic food, but it's not a very harmful thing. I mean, if you like to take black coffee, or some people, I mean, many people nowadays try to avoid milk because of all the cruelty that is involved in the modern day dairy industry. Cows are not treated as that is in Bhagavan's time or in Lord Krishna's time, cows were treated very differently to how they're treated nowadays. So unless you're able to get unless you're sure of the source of your milk, but it's coming from cows who are really cared for from womb to tomb, it's best to avoid milk and all dairy products. Unfortunately, it's just the nature of the world, of the modern day world we live in. So there are so many alternatives. Like for milk, many people who prefer to avoid milk because of on the grounds of ahimsa, many people take soya milk, oat milk, almond milk. There are so many milk substitutes nowadays which people can take. But this is not something we need to dwell upon too much. We should try to eat we should try to make our diet as sattvic as reasonably possible, but we shouldn't be dwelling upon that too much. If you're habituated to taking coffee, then it's not going to do any great harm.
Thank you, Michael.
But if everything in excess is harmful, that's why Bhagavan said mita sattvika ahara niyama. Mita means moderate. So it should be moderate in quantity, moderate in quality. If you're drinking really strong black coffee all day long, it's probably not very good for you. But if you take a little bit, coffee once or twice a day, it's probably not going to do much harm either.
Thank you, Michael. The next question we have is from Sanjay Lohia. Sir, you say the following in your video dated 26/10/2025 at 31 minutes. Nothing special about this current waking state. This waking state is for whom? It's for the person we seem to be. But we are not this person. Our whole life is a dream, you say. This waking state is for the person we seem to be. When I heard this, I thought that the waking state is for ego. So could you please explain in which way this waking is for the person we seem to be, but not for the ego?
I didn't say it's not for ego. Of course it's for ego. But as ego, we experience ourselves as a person. So it's as this person that we experience this waking state.
Thanks, Michael.
That
Yeah,
is,
the person we seem to be is the ego.
It is the ego that is aware of itself as I am Sanjay, but this waking state appears. So in that sense only, I meant it's for the person. Actually, if I were more precise, it is only for ego, not for the person, because the person is jada. The person consists of the 5 sheaths which are jada. But because as ego we identify ourselves as a person, we often say it's for the person.
Yes, sir. So because I was slightly confused there between what you said there and like what I understood. So
The problem is I'm usually too precise. So
yeah,
when I'm not precise, when I'm not as precise as usual, it looks strange. But in normal sense, we say it's for the person. But that's a shorthand way of saying it's for the
yes,
ego that identifies that person as I.
yes, yes, that makes more sense.
Yeah,
That makes more sense.
right.
Yes.
Sanjay, do you want to ask your second question or you want me to read it for you?
I can ask. No problem. So, sir, one more question I have. When Bhagavan was suffering from cancer and someone asked him, Bhagavan, is the pain too much? Bhagavan apparently said, there is pain, but the pain is not other than me.
Yes.
My question, sir, is there are 2 questions. Why did Bhagavan say there is pain when we know that Bhagavan was above pain and pleasure? 1. 2. And how is pain not other than Bhagavan?
Okay. The first question is, when people ask that question to Bhagavan, they're asking to the person they see Bhagavan to be. That person who Bhagavan seems to be was obviously in pain. Recently, someone sent me an account of one person who visited just for a few days in 1949. He was an Englishman, but later he settled in America and he became a professor of anthropology. But he had spent quite a lot of time with Marananda Maima in Varanasi. And he came to South India and he spent just 1 or 2 days at the ashram. And he wrote about his impressions of, he was allowed into the old hall to take leave of Bhagavan when there was only a few attendants were there. That wasn't the old hall. It was when Bhagavan was in the auditorium, in the stone hall, in the new hall. And one of the things he mentions there he asked Bhagavan something about the pain. He said it was obvious that the body was in pain. Bhagavan's arm was twitching with pain, he said. But when he asked Bhagavan, when you have so much spiritual power, why don't you use that power to heal yourself? And I can't remember exactly what Bhagavan said, but he said something that it's no concern. Why should I concern myself? It's just the body. And that person then asked, but for you it may be just a body, but for your, at least for the sake of your devotees, shouldn't you try to heal yourself? And then Bhagavan said, where are there any others? Or something like that. But the reason I mention this is he said the body was so obviously in pain. You could see Bhagavan's arm was twitching with pain. So when people ask Bhagavan, is there pain? Because they're taking Bhagavan to be a body, Bhagavan said, yes, there is pain. That's the answer to your first question. The second question is, your second question about why he said, but the pain is not other than me, because in Bhagavan's view, there is nothing other than himself. So what we see as a body and as pain and as a world, all these things, none of it is other than Bhagavan, because he's the one underlying reality, what we see as all this multiplicity is what he sees as himself, the one.
So, sir, he could have also equally well said that the pain is other than me, because though there is pain, but it is not me. It is something apart from me. That's also true.
That's also true in a certain sense, but that's in a more superficial sense. When we say things are other than us, it's because we're trying to isolate ourselves. But for Bhagavan, there's nothing other than himself. During the course of practice, we need to separate ourselves from all other things. We need to separate the knower from the known, the seer from the seen, in order to focus our attention only on ourselves as the subject, the knower. But when we know ourselves as we actually are, there is nothing other than ourselves. We alone are. So it is that's why in verses 17 and 18 of Uladunapadu, Bhagavan said, both for Vijnani and for the Ajnani, the body is I. The body indeed is I. But the difference is, for the Ajnani, I is limited to the form of the body, whereas for the Jnani, I is unlimited. And likewise about the world. The world is real, both for the Jnani and the Ajnani. But for the Jnani, the Ajnani, the world is limited to the names and forms of the world, whereas for the Jnani, the reality is the underlying adhara, the basis of the world.
Thank you, sir.
So
Thank
the
you.
world is real as Satchit. It's unreal as a mass of names and forms. But likewise, the body is nothing other than I, but the I is not limited to the body.
So when Bhagavan says there is pain, he's speaking from the onlooker's perspective, not from his perspective.
Exactly. And when he says the pain is not other than me, he's talking from his perspective.
His perspective. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Next question is from Steve. Ego sounds like a mirage in Bhagavan's teachings. T.S. Eliot's cat, Macavity, came to my mind. For when they reach the scene of crime, Macavity's not there. Ego creates all the problem and yet does not exist. Michael gave an analogy based on Chit Jada Granthi that helped. Quote, if pieces of string, if you have two pieces of string, if they become tightly entangled, you have got a knot. That knot is not either piece of the string. If you separate the strings, you have got no knot. So the knot is something that is formed by the entanglement, by the conflation of I with this Jada body. This bundle of 5 sheets, that conflated mixture, is what is called ego. Would Michael have anything to add to this understanding of ego?
Just a quick comment on the mirage analogy. We have to be a little bit careful of the mirage analogy because it's often used in a way that is often it is said, but in the case of a mirage, even after you know it's a mirage, it still appears. That is, even when you understand that what appears to be water shimmering in the distant horizon is not actually water, it's just rising hot air. Even if you're convinced of that, you still see it as if there is water there. This analogy is often said, but after attaining jnana, the world still appears, but you know it's not real, or something like that. And that is often contrasted with the snake rope analogy. In the case of the snake rope analogy, once you see that the snake is a rope, you no longer see it as a snake. So that mirage analogy, it's a nice analogy to use to satisfy others, but it's not so appropriate because when we know the reality, there is no appearance. That is when we see that the snake is a rope, there's no snake at all. Likewise, when we see what we actually are, the body, mind, world, all cease to exist. So that I just mentioned that we need to be a little bit careful about that mirage analogy. It's a good analogy, but it can easily be misapplied because the mirage continues to appear even after you recognize it that it's a mirage. Whereas when we know the truth, when we know, as Bhagavan says in the 3rd and 4th paragraphs of Nana, so long as the world appears, Swarupa does not appear. When Swarupa appears, the world does not appear. Because the world is nothing but a misperception of Swarupa. Swarupa means what we actually are. So when we see ourselves as we actually are, we don't see the world. When we see the world, we don't see ourselves as we actually are. But the other parts of that comment about ego, yes, I think as far as I followed it, yes, it seemed to be correct.
Do you have any follow-up questions, Steve? You're here.
I suppose that the basis of the question was, I'm fairly clear that from Michael's insistence, look within, turn within, but the problem seems to be that stopping us behind vastness seems to be the ego, and then at the same time, the ego is put as, in the end, it's like a mythical beast. It doesn't actually exist.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if there's anything. The string analogy was a lovely thing you'd said that seemed to help. That you said if you take the Jada body,
Yeah.
and mix it with awareness and into a knot, that knot is ego. I think that I'm correct in that understanding.
Yeah.
And that seemed to make sense
That
because
is
when you take it
ego
apart,
is neither the body nor Sat Chit. It's the conflation of the two.
yes. Yes. So I could understand the analogy of if you tie two bits of strings together, there's a knot, but the knot is not intrinsic. If you open it,
Yeah,
there is no
yeah,
knot.
yes.
Yeah, so I just wondered because, as you say, right now I'm coming from ego. Everybody's, as long as I'm
Yeah,
seeing
yeah.
multiplicity, everyone's coming from ego. I just wondered if there's more you could say. Maybe there's not actually, but
Well,
about
I can
ego.
add one more thing about this. That is, ultimately, ego doesn't exist. When we investigate ourselves keenly enough, we will find there's no such thing as ego. But it's very important to understand everything else seems to exist only in the view of ego. So people are often very glibly say, "Oh, ego is unreal. Ego doesn't exist." But as Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Ulunaptu, if ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. So long as we are aware of the appearance of everything, so long as we
Yes.
are aware of it, we have to acknowledge the seeming existence of ego. We have to acknowledge, but we who are aware of all this are this seeming entity called ego. So ego is not ultimately real, but it is the basis of the seeming reality of everything else. Everything else seems real because we seem to be ego. So that's very important to understand, that that is the fact that ego ultimately doesn't exist at all is necessary to understand, but we shouldn't misapply that. We should understand that everything else seems to exist only because of ego, only because we have risen as ego. Ego is not something other than ourselves. That is, we who are talking now, it's as ego that we're having this conversation.
And so our job is to untie the knots.
Exactly. And the way to untie the knot is to hold on to the real element of ego. Because though in that analogy there are two pieces of string, the second piece of string doesn't actually exist. The second piece of string comes into existence as a result of a knot. So actually there's only one piece of string, but it seems to be two pieces of string when they're tied together. But if we go back to a root, we find it's all only one.
It's only the awareness and not the body.
Yes, yes. The body seems to exist only because we've risen as ego. That's why that is why it's very important. Bhagavan, in verse 24 of Ulunapdu, Bhagavan says the jada body, the insentient body does not say I. In other words, the body is not aware of itself as I. Satchit doesn't rise. But in between, one thing, I, rises as the extent of a body. Because it rises, it's not Satchit. But because it's I, it's aware, it's not the body, but it rises as if it is the body, at the extent of a body. It's limited itself to the extent of a body. And then he says, no, but this is chit jada granti, bondage, bandham, subtle body, ego, this samsara, and mind. But Granti, Bandham, Jivan, Jiva. So these are all different names for that I, but rises as the extent of a body. So if we take that verse in isolation, we can say, oh, there are two things. There's Satchit and there's a body. And between there's something called ego but rises. But he makes it very clear in verse 26, two verses later, but nothing exists independent of ego. So we have to understand this body comes into or seems to exist only because we've risen as ego. So ultimately what exists is only Sat-Chit. And because it never rises, not rising means not changing in any way whatsoever. It always is just as it is.
It is amazing, really, isn't it? Because we spend all our lives in ego. So far.
Yeah, exactly. And
Up to this point.
when this comes to an end, then when it comes to an end, it has never actually existed. We talk about manodnasa, the annihilation of mind, eradication of ego. But Bhagavan made it clear what is called the eradication of ego is just the recognition that no such thing as ego has ever existed. So when we attain liberation, we will find liberation is eternal. That doesn't mean from that point in time onwards it's eternal. It means we are eternally liberated. We are liberated even now. Because even now what we actually are is only Sat-Chit. Though we seem to be ego.
Paradox is the mind can't, it could only be, it can't intellectualize, it can be.
Yeah. Because when we talk about these things, we're going to the very limit of that is the mind and intellect and logic all functions within this appearance of multiplicity. But the root cause of the appearance of multiplicity is ego. So when we go to when we begin to discuss the nature of ego, we are going to the very limits of logic. That is, ego is the first cause. It's the cause of causality. It's the cause of cause and effect. So people sometimes, why does ego exist? Why did ego rise in the first place? That question can't be answered because why is asking for a cause or a reason. There is no cause or reason prior to ego.
Obviously, I don't fully understand this, but because
we need Maya cannot be understood, but ego is Maya. Maya means she who is not. So we cannot understand non-existence, but we need to understand enough to understand what is the solution. We have a problem. We all know we've got a problem. We've got a big problem on our hands. What is the solution to this problem? What we need to understand is the solution. If we understand the solution, that's all that is necessary. We then need to apply the solution. The solution is, of course, self-investigation.
With the solution, self-investigation, I was wondering, obviously this is always pointing this way, but people are always interested on the outside. So I was wondering, you do many of these talks. Are you staying to some extent within all the way through the talks and the questions and the answers? Is it something that you're practicing within the talks?
I wish. If we are honest with ourselves, I think we will all have to admit that we should be self-attentive to a greater extent than we are. We're all falling short. But Bhagavan says self-investigation is always keeping the mind fixed on oneself. Can any of us honestly say that we're always keeping our mind fixed on ourselves? We would all like to be able to say it honestly, but we can't. So we are trying our best. That's all we can say. Even in the midst of other activities, we should be trying. That doesn't mean we always are trying. So when I'm talking, I'm saying what we should be doing. So I can honestly say, do what I say, don't do what I do. Because I fall far short of what I'm saying, but we should all be doing.
Well, thank you for your encouragement. Thank you for
Right.
encouragement.
Well, yes. I mean, that's all. We can do our best. As Krishna says in Gita, Sane Sane, gradually, we need to wean our mind off its tasting going outwards and cultivate that love to go within. This is a process. It takes time. It takes practice. None of us are perfect. If we were perfect, we wouldn't be here. So we are all struggling. We're all in the same boat.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Michael. We are at the end of 2 hours. We still have
Yes.
2 more questions, which I will ask in the subsequent session.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michael, for your
Okay,
time.
right. Thank you.
Namo Ramanaya. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, can I just add one thing? If
Sure, please go.
anyone who's attending, or if anyone who sees this video was attending yesterday's meeting with the Ramana Maharshi Foundation UK, Shalini said there were 10 questions remaining at the end of the meeting, which we would keep for the next meeting. I said, not a problem, because she said she had put them in the chat for me. Usually the chat is recorded in a text message, but for some reason, those questions were not recorded. So if anyone had asked a question yesterday and wants it answered, please remember what you asked, because the record of what people had asked yesterday has been lost.
Sure. Thank you, Michael. I
Yeah.
think they will get back with the questions.
Yes,
Thank
I
you.
hope so. I hope they don't forget. Well, if their questions are important enough, I hope they'll remember their questions.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, right. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Namo Ramana.